All right, so we are at 5:30. Thank you for joining us. Those of you who are watching us live, welcome. My name is Lupe Hernandez. I'm a student success advisor at ICANN. I work out of the Coralville office, out of the Kirkwood Regional Center, and I also work in Davenport out of the St. Ambrose University North Davenport Education Center. Today's topic has to do with verification and special circumstances. So filing the FAFSA is the first step in the financial aid process, and there are some families that might have some situations arise after the FAFSA is submitted that families need to take care of in order for the student to hopefully get the most financial aid as possible. And we're going to go over two things tonight. I do have special guests with me today. We're very grateful to them for volunteering to be a part of this. Matt Falduto from Kirkwood, Julie Hawk from St. Ambrose University, and Isaac Eilers from Iowa State University. So I have some questions prepared, and we'll just go and take care of these questions. And again, you guys, this is I'm just going to ask the questions and then have the person, I'll say, Matt, and then I'll ask the question and then you can answer. If anybody wants to interject afterward, feel free to do so. So the first thing I want to go over is verification. So Julie, can you just go over what verification is?
Verification is the process of the school verifying, I'll use that word twice, verifying the information that you provided on the FAFSA form. So there's about a 30% random chance that the Department of Ed will select you for that process. The other selections are usually done at the school based on information maybe looking a little incorrect, like maybe your wages and your adjusted gross income from your taxes doesn't look quite right, or we're questioning something. So if you do the data retrieval process with the IRS, when you file your FAFSA, you're less likely to be selected for verification because the information pulls over correctly directly from your federal taxes. So right. I think I went right into question 2, who's most likely. But we go over people that, as an institution for St. Ambrose, what we will do is we look at every single FAFSA that pulls into our system, and we just make sure that everything looks appropriate. Like you didn't leave your income questions blank. You didn't, your AGI or your AGI and your tax paid don't match, just for basic errors that we see come through.
Okay. That's good. Okay, Matt, is there like a little bit to add on to what Julie said? Is there like when families are filling out the FAFSA and they get the confirmation page, is it more likely that students who would like maybe qualify for Pell or unsubsidized loans that they would be selected for verification, or is it just really randomly selected, 30% submitted, 30% of the students get selected?
So there is a random element to it. But there is also a criteria that the Department of Education uses to select students for verification. They won't share what that criteria is with anyone. It's their proprietary information. So we don't know exactly, but just from experience of looking at who has been selected for verification at Kirkwood and other colleges over the years, I feel confident in saying that if a student is eligible for Pell Grant, they are more likely to be selected for verification. We've certainly seen that pattern. Also, like Julie said, if some of the numbers just don't seem right, then students would be more likely to be selected as well. If something just doesn't seem to make sense, the AGI and the income just don't really connect well, then they might be more likely to be selected as well in those situations.
Okay. Isaac, go ahead.
I was just going to add, we do look specifically at Pell Grant recipients and students that maybe parents list no income in the household. So then we will question if you haven't checked the box that says you receive SSI or any federal benefits, then we'll question typically how you're supporting the household. So that will for us.
Sure. Sometimes we work with families where the parents or a parent is undocumented. Does that kind of, you think, I don't want to say the word trigger, but does that kind of is it safe for us at ICANN to just mention to the family, this might happen, just keep an eye out for those emails?
Yes, yes. Super low income is a trigger for us. Yep.
Okay. All right. Isaac, what does, at least at Iowa State, what does a verification, like, what does that entail at Iowa State?
Yeah, so verification typically entails verifying your tax information. So usually that's turning in a copy of a parent or a student's federal 1040 tax return. And then usually verifying some of your household data from the FAFSA as well. So verifying who lives in your household. And usually that's just a form that the institution has that parents fill out and sign and turn in. So usually it's really kind of looking at that household data form, which is that form can vary from school to school, but it's usually that form, and then really turning in those federal 1040 tax returns that the FAFSA is going to be based off of. And usually between those two documents, that resolves most verification. But in other instances, they may be needing to turn in things like W-2 forms or things like that as well.
Okay. If a student is selected for verification, they'll notify the student, correct? Because of, I believe, FERPA, right? Is the student notified versus the parent?
So at Iowa State, we do notify both the parent and the student that there is pending verification documents. Now, because of all the rules and regulations around it, we don't go into depths about how do you resolve that in those emails. We're just basically letting you know, hey, there is verification pending. And then for Iowa State specifically, we have like an online student portal where all of those required documents would be posted, letting you know what you need to turn in. And so then the student or parent could log in and see that there.
Perfect.
It's a little different at Kirkwood. We do not notify the parents of that. Everything goes through the student. So the student would need to take care of all of the different verification requirements and loop their parent in if there's parent information that's required. But we do not reach out to the parents.
Okay. Before we move on to special circumstances, does anybody have anything else to add about verification? And am I correct in saying that if a student is selected for verification, it's best to return that paperwork as soon as possible, like to get that done as soon as possible? Because isn't that needed in order to move on to to put together a financial offer?
Yes, definitely want to get all of that, all of those financial aid requests done as quickly as possible so that we can create an award offer for the student as quick as possible. So, yep, definitely get it in quick.
Okay.
For a first-time student at St. Ambrose, we'll do an estimated financial aid offer. So it'll say specifically that this is an estimated offer pending documentation submission.
All right.
We'll see what possibly could be, but then those things could change if there was, if there's discrepancies in the information they provided.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to move on to special circumstances. Can Isaac, if you can explain what a special circumstance request is?
Yeah, so special circumstances is any time that maybe the data on the FAFSA doesn't maybe accurately reflect a parent or student's financial circumstances. So potentially if a parent maybe has lost a job since they filed their taxes, or has reduced earnings in their job, or different things like that, or maybe there's been a death of a parent or a separation, any of those kind of criteria. Special circumstances allows financial aid advisors at institutions to make adjustments to the FAFSA to more accurately reflect the family's financial circumstances, which then in turn would potentially adjust what financial aid the student may be eligible for.
Okay. All right. And Julie, who needs to, like, if a family does need to, if there's been a situation in the household that's affecting the family's income after the FAFSA is filed, like, who needs to be contacted at the college? Like at St. Ambrose, who do they call?
Well, we have a one-stop shop that answers all of our incoming calls and emails called B Central. So they would call them first. They would tell them what their situation is. Typically that would be forwarded on to me. I process all of those. And then I would either speak with them or through B Central determine if the situation they have warrants a special condition adjustment. I can usually, just by talking to them and looking at their FAFSA data, say whether or not it's going to make a difference and benefit them in any way, either by getting them state grant or federal grant or any additional need-based aid through St. Ambrose funds.
Okay. All right. Sometimes I've come across situations with families where we filed the FAFSA and, you know, the FAFSA requires prior year tax returns, and the family's telling me, you know, this is not what it looks like right now. My question is, if there is a special circumstance that needs to be addressed, does the student have to have applied and been accepted to the college in order to you know, start this conversation about a special circumstance?
For us, yes. Only because we do not pull in FAFSA data until that student is admitted. So I won't see their information until they're admitted. If they want to have a conversation, we can absolutely have a conversation about their situation and if we think it would warrant them, and then they can start actually collecting documents if they're in the process of applying and being admitted. They can start gathering things and being ready, but we won't actually be able to get any real numbers until we pull their FAFSA data into our system.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Matt, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say at Kirkwood, as a community college, we're an open access institution, so everybody is accepted, but they would have to have an application on file. They would have to have applied to Kirkwood in order for us to pull in their FAFSA and then be able to determine what we would need to do for special circumstances. So we definitely would have to have the FAFSA on file before we can move forward on any kind of special circumstances.
Okay. And again, Matt, and I guess it just depends on the situation, but typically, like, what type of information or documents are typically required? Like, if there's, yeah, like, what is usually like typical for information that's requested by the school to move forward with a special circumstance?
Yeah, so the most common special circumstance that we process is an income difference. So, like you said, they look at the prior year tax information. So that's 2 years old. So it definitely could be the case where they were making a whole lot more money back then than they are now. And so what we'd ask them to do is document what their current income is, you know, for the student, and then if they're a dependent student, the parent's income as well. And so they can do that with like a W-2 form, something like that, that would show their current income earned to date. And then we would extrapolate that out for the entire year to try to get an idea of what is the more accurate representation of their financial situation, so we can best determine what aid they'd be eligible for.
Okay. Thank you. Isaac, at Iowa State approximately, and Matt and Julie can answer this question after Isaac, but if a family, you know, how long does it take for the financial aid office to make a decision after the college is contacted about a special circumstance?
Yeah, so it can definitely vary depending on circumstance and depending on the documents that we need to process the review, and also depending on the time of year. So the earlier people get their appeals into us, the quicker we can process them. But typically if students and families are getting those documents into us in June or July, it tends to take a little bit longer to process, but I would say typically we're processing applications usually within 3 to 4 weeks of receiving them, that we've processed them and have a determination back to the family and student.
Okay. What about at Kirkwood, Matt? How long would that process take?
So we kind of think about it in terms of after they get us all the documentation. So once we have everything we need in order to make that decision, then it's 3 to 5 business days for us to do that. But it could take a, you know, it could go into the weeks like Isaac talked about if we're waiting for documentation to get to us. So that's why it is so important to get that documentation as quick as possible to us so we can make that determination.
Okay.
Same at St. Ambrose. It depends on the time of the year, what else is happening in the office. And again, if they have their documents complete when they submit them. I try to shoot for less than 2 weeks, but sometimes it can take up to 4. It's been, you know, the volume over the last 2 years, you know, with the pandemic and the job loss that's been out there, the volume has definitely increased.
Okay.
So I put on my form, you know, within 30 days, but sooner.
Okay. And Julie, I'll just stay with you. So if a special circumstance is approved by the college, could it, like, and if their EFC goes down, the family's expected family contribution, could it affect other aid that has already been awarded to the student?
Absolutely. If their EFC drops, say they aren't receiving federal Pell Grant, which the expected family contribution cutoff is, remind me, Matt, 76 or something.
That's we'll go with that. That's close enough.
We're close. We're close. So say they're not a Pell Grant recipient and we do an income reduction that could push them into that Pell Grant level. It would also could potentially increase our institutional dollars, you know, with need-based grant money above and beyond what they're going to receive as an academic award. In Iowa, obviously, we have the Iowa tuition grant at private Iowa colleges. That's another thing I look at. If a parent calls in and says, you know, hey, here's my situation, and sometimes I can get in and they can tell me a number and I can tell them whether or not it's going to affect. If it's not, I don't make people go through the paperwork if it's not going to benefit them positively with aid. And a lot of times, you know, we have a 2-parent household and the lower income earning parent, you know, gets their hours, you know, it may not make enough difference to benefit them going through the paperwork process, because I can tell by looking at their numbers from their FAFSA, it's not going to make them eligible for any additional aid. So that, because it is kind of a paperwork nightmare sometimes, depending on what they have to submit. But in most cases, especially with state grant at a private Iowa college, many more students are eligible for that than they are the lower income Pell Grant. So it definitely can make a big difference in somebody's financial aid offer.
Okay.
And then similarly for community college students, there's the state programs of vocational technical grant and the QB grant. And both of those are based on EFC as well. So definitely doing the special circumstances could change their eligibility for those 2 programs as well if they're a community college student in a career and technical program.
Okay, thank you.
I would say don't be afraid to ask the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you know your income, you're filing and you're looking at your 2021 income and it's now 2022, and you're like, how am I going to afford this? Don't be afraid to call and just ask the question. We do this a lot. We're pretty well versed and we can tell, you know, if it's going to benefit you or not. So.
Okay. Isaac, we'll finish up with you. So if can special circumstance requests be done throughout the academic year? Like we help families, of course, October, November, a lot, December, but if something were to happen, God forbid, in August and someone passes away or loses a job, families can talk to the college at any time, or right? I'm assuming.
Yep. So at any time during the academic year that a family has a change in financial circumstances, or even if maybe they had one earlier in the year and they just didn't submit one at that time when they had that situation occur, they can submit that at any time at Iowa State, and we will review it and make our determinations for aid and everything like that. But we do allow them at any time during the academic year.
Okay. All right. Do any of you have anything else to add before we finish our Wednesday webinar for today?
I can say at St. Ambrose, piggybacking on that, if it's a job loss, we do have a minimum 8 to 10 week window where if they lose a job, we want them to wait just to make sure that they're not going to be reemployed. So it makes enough difference in their income to make an adjustment. So we do have a waiting period for that, but we will look at them at any time during the year.
Perfect. Anybody else want to add anything else regarding verification or special circumstance?
I would just reiterate that if you have questions about any change in circumstance or things like that, don't hesitate to reach out to the colleges or universities that you're looking at attending to. They will be able to help you and determine if it's worth to go through the process or not. And so even if you maybe are on the fence of if it's a situation would qualify or something like that, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. And all of our offices can help.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah, we
All
have,
right, go ahead.
on our form, we have canned, we have a list of 6 or 7 circumstances, but every situation could be unique. So if it doesn't fit on the form, it doesn't mean we won't look at it. We'll put it that way. So.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, I want to thank all of you, Matt, Julie, and Isaac for taking part in our Wednesday webinar. For those of you who are listening, whether it's live or Facebook or the recorded version, if you have not done your FAFSA form for next academic year, please do so here soon. Iowa State's priority date, I believe, is January 3rd. UNI is January 15th. And I think the Kirkwood Foundation Scholarship deadline is March 15th, which I think the FAFSA is needed for that. So if you haven't done your FAFSA, get it done, hopefully soon here. If you need help filing the FAFSA, give us a call and we'll be more than happy to assist you, whether it's a virtual appointment or in person in one of our 8 locations across the state of Iowa. Thank you very much again for joining us. Thank you to my panelists. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.